Alrighty, hello and welcome to this live stream. I feel like a radio DJ in the jazz hours of the night. Welcome everyone to our interview today. My name is Brooke, representing Double Hands, and today we are interviewing the lovely real human being, 88756. 88756, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling excellent, thank you very much, Brooke. How are you?
I'm very well. It's just me here today interviewing 8756. The other half of Double Hands, Richard, could not be here, unfortunately. So, I'm glad that you're here, sort of in his place to be interviewed. He wore this pin last week. If you could wear it this week, that'd be really nice. Just because, it feels wrong if I wear both the egg pins. I've noticed it. It's really weird. Richard's a big fan of you, but I've never seen you guys in the same room together. What's with that? No, it's very funny. It's not that hard. You just put that's backwards. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're just going to be sort of asking you some questions about your music and your process. And this is, of course, all sort of promotion lead up to, if you can hold that poster up there for me, to an event that's happening next week. This is the Lost in Sound. Isn't that the camera? There we go. So next Saturday, Lost in Sound is happening. Whoa, this is the special effects. This is real. Lost in Sound is happening at Warehouse 25 in Milton. We're going to be in the bunker downstairs from 8 p.m. until late. So Olympic Pool Maintenance League, who we interviewed last week, is going to be there. 88756 is going to be there. And Administrator, who we'll be interviewing next week, is also going to be there. So let's start things off with a good one. On a scale of 1 to 0, because that's binary, it's a fun bit, because you're a real human being and not a robot, definitely a real human being. How excited are you for the gig?
Well, again, I don't understand the question because I'm a real human being. Would you mind putting that in some kind of context that I can get behind?
Yeah, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for this very cool event that's happening next week?
I'm going to answer that question in binary. 1. Either 1 or 0. 1 is excited, 0 is not excited. There you go. No, I'm really, really, really excited. It's going to be the first event, at least in a little while, that I've had a chance to play at. And I don't know, the venue is really cool. We've been out there a few times. The lineup is lovely. I saw you guys interview Chris last week. I don't know. I'm really keen. I think it'll also be a really cool atmosphere and hopefully an excuse for a bunch of people to come together and have a good time.
What is playing live like different, compared to every other part of this process? In terms of, I imagine it's very different to making music in a studio at home versus, hearing something out and about. What does sort of the actual playing live experience feel like?
So it depends who you ask, but it's very different DJing or playing live versus producing. So I would suggest the vast majority of producers aren't making music to be played live. They're making music to be listened to in headphones and albums, CDs, their stories, etc., which is lovely and fantastic. But when you're playing live, you're specifically playing tools that people have written for the live context that you know are going to sound good in that environment. They may not necessarily make sense if you're just listening to them at home through headphones or whatever. But I don't know, I feel like it's had a really big impact in what I write, for example. So with the exception of this track, which is currently playing, everything I produced early on before I had any live experience was very song-ish, if that makes sense. It was proper music, it had breaks, builds, choruses, you name it. Even some kind of, I'm going to say this away from the microphone. Ooh. This track was great though. This was a very, very happy accident. I don't know. It's a very, very different thing. It gives music like this a proper context, if that makes sense. Would you agree with that, based on your limited live experience?
I've absolutely no idea. It's really hard to tell, as someone who has heard very minimal techno, electro, this kind of music in my life. So much music that I have ever listened to has been in headphones, or you go see a band and they play one song and then they go, thanks for coming guys, and then they play the next song. So I really respect the art of DJing in terms of there is so much you have to understand that's going on right now. And you have to be listening to so many things and putting things together and looking at words like reverb and flanger. It's all really confusing. It's a really good point though, it's something that I hadn't considered, I guess, that people would make things for this context versus for this context. Your latest release was an album called Toolkit. And you used the word toolkit there in those sentences you were saying before. Am I right to assume that that was an album full of things meant specifically as tools for DJing live?
Thanks for plugging the latest release, Toolkit. That is one of my favorite releases for that reason, in the sense that every single track on there has a purpose. So it starts with opening track, which is the opening track. I actually really enjoyed most of the tracks in that album for standalone songs, but that's not why they were written. So they're all functional tools, essentially, and of the stuff I've written, bar the stuff that hopefully you'll hear tonight, that's newer, unreleased, etc. Because this is all the learning process, the journey. Like, you get better with everything you write and so on, as with any other art form, basically. That was my favorite takeaway from your interview with Chris, actually, was just how the self-improvement that man has made in this genre. I'm definitely the same way, so everything I write I feel like is better than the last thing I've written, which I feel like is the producer's curse, actually, because most people just don't release things, right? Because they always feel like they could do better, essentially. Whereas I'm more just happy. I think most of the stuff I put out is good, you know? It's not the best I've ever written, and honestly some stuff I'm writing now / will play for you tonight is really good, in my opinion. But honestly, that's because it's so functional. Like, there's one or two pieces of music in there that I feel like I finally managed to nail down the how to keep a track interesting with only essentially percussion as a story. Or just basically, like, the reason I like techno so much is it doesn't involve your classic songwriting techniques. So as a real human being, I find it I find it natural to dissect songs that are written chordally, tonally, that have a progression, essentially. Like, all pop music and so on, it's very, like, I'm not saying I could write it, but it's very easy to dissect how it's written and why it sounds good, if that makes sense. Whereas with a lot of techno music, it's just so inhuman and so, like, unnatural sounding, but still captivating in a way that I just find awe-inspiring, frankly. And I've always tried my best to try and chase that sound, but it's not easy. It's so hard. And I'm finally getting somewhere with that caveat, basically.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, the idea of, like, this being music that doesn't sound like what so many people recognize as music. Is that, I mean, I guess this sort of leads us into asking sort of your background in music and how you got to this point making techno, but as someone who listens to, like, the pop music on the radio, I can imagine it would be so hard to hear things like that and then go, how do I break everything about that and make it exactly the opposite? So I guess what got you to this point making this kind of music? Did you sort of wake up one day and go, wow, I want to just fuck some shit up? Or is it sort of like a progression through a couple of different genres?
Honestly, I just got bored. So I got bored with real songwriting, you know? Like, there are many talented artists out there. And especially in this day and age when anyone can make music. Like, software is much more accessible, even some intro hardware is accessible. You can teach yourself online. That's what I did, basically. I've never had a proper music lesson or anything. It didn't make any sense for me to be trying to contribute something that had been done already, if that makes sense. And I actually ended up having a 2 to 3 year break from music where I didn't release as much stuff or even think about it. And it wasn't until I heard some techno tracks that I was instantly struck by just how alien it seemed to me, if that makes sense, like, and how unnatural everything I was hearing was. And I found that fascinating as a problem, and I really just, like, needed to dissect that and make it my own, if that makes sense. Is that funny, is it? And solve the problem, yes. Also, I think especially as a younger person and so on, you hear a lot of tracks that are great, like especially old 90s records and so on, even going earlier. And it's only now in hindsight that I realize why they're great. They're so minimal, you know? Like, I was that person listening to, you'd have a rave scene in a movie and they weren't playing EDM. And whatever track they were playing, it just worked, essentially, in that capacity. So, like, I can remember hearing some Boys Noise tracks, for example, off a show called Misfits, which I don't know if you've seen or not. But I don't know, it just makes sense in that context. It's the kind of thing where, like, you realize at the time that it's really good, but it's not memorable enough to stand out to you. And then later on, you're like, no, I love that, essentially. And to clarify, I hated techno when I first heard it. Like, techno's been around for ages. I remember listening to it growing up. I never understood. Even anything with a 4 to the floor kind of never made sense to me. Like, I assumed it was lazy, frankly. But yeah, I know I've really, really come around to it. I also think there is still a lot of lazy techno, you know? But it has a special place in my heart now, essentially.
What do you think changed? Anything in particular, or you just sort of like spent some time with the uns and then go, this is the unces to my heart? Or you have a heart, right? Yeah.
Again, real human being. Definitely have a heart. It's okay. I think in my case as well, we started going to events and hearing this music live, and it makes much, much more sense live. Like, I love this stuff now and would listen to it anywhere, but I'd highly recommend if you don't understand it, or I end up dragging you somewhere, this you or anyone, essentially, any of our friends, it needs to be in a live setting, and I've seen people visibly go, oh yeah, no, that checks out, you know? Like, they would never listen to it by themselves, but in the right environment, the right setting, surrounded by the lovely people that go to these events, it just clicks, essentially.
This is the thing I remember we mentioned briefly last week, is that it definitely makes sense. Again, like, I have been to a couple of events now, and it's just like, you hear this stuff on like not so loud speakers, and you're like, that's how it's good. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting concept. I find it like wacky. What was sort of like, so you had come from sort of like a vaguely traditional songwriting kind of background. What was the learning curve like into getting into something like this from where you'd come from? Like, was it difficult to, sort of drop rules that you'd learned?
It's still difficult. Like, I can't, I'll be writing music and it's only at the end where I'm like, damn it, I did the thing again. I accidentally used a huge breakdown and a pile of chords, and now it's not what I want, I can't remember the last time as well that I've ever produced music for the basic sole purpose of playing live and for people as a DJ. So like, when I DJ as well, I don't necessarily just play my tracks. So I'm going to be playing my tracks tonight because it's fun. But normally I'll be spread over 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 channels, frankly, and just piling people's songs together and just being like, I need the low end of that, this loop of this part of this, etc. And it's essentially like producing on the fly, in my opinion. But that's only possible because the music is so minimal and so like, it lends itself to being combined with other music, If you're trying to put 2 pop songs together, they sound terrible. Doesn't matter what they are. Even if they're in the same key, vocals over the top of each other, they're both as loud as humanly possible. You can't put them together. They just sound crappy, There are exceptions, of course. There are some cool mashups and stuff. But techno itself, like, a traditional DJ tool is mixing in key. So what you're supposed to do is find a track, find the key of the track, choose your next track, work out what key that track is, and if the tracks will combine well, essentially. So tracks that are a fifth apart musically will sound okay, and like 1 step out will sound terrible, and stuff like that. Techno, it does not matter, right? Like, you just put it, and then you put the next track on, and it's going to sound good. You basically like have to account for things like how the energy changes in a track. So tracks with not so loud percussion are gonna basically clash with tracks with nothing. You may have to account for that and so on, but like, for the most part, it's, as long as you know your tracks well, it's really natural. It sounds better, in my opinion, than just playing the tracks by themselves, and it's so much fun. Like, that's all.
This is something that, again, I think I briefly mentioned last week. You, from my experience, are someone who plays many songs in very short amount of time. 8875, 30 tracks in 30 minutes, 5/6 is what they call you. From what I understand, that isn't the regular, that isn't the norm, I don't think. What, is that true? Am I correct in saying that? And why?
So DJing has a lot of context, right, to clarify that. So like, what I do, DJing techno music specifically for a certain scene in a certain way, is very contextual. Like, you wouldn't do this at a wedding, which is probably, don't joke about it, like the #1 source of income for DJs is DJing weddings and other events and stuff like that. And at these kind of events, like, mixing skills are much, much less required.
I will allow you to do this at my wedding.
I'd appreciate that. There we go. Well, now you've made me lose my train of thought, because now I'm picturing DJing your wedding. That's cute. Yeah, so it depends contextually, basically, on what's going on. And not everyone likes it either, Like, the person standing up here smashing 3 things together for no reason is just showing off and not necessarily adding value to what's going on, if you're at the vast majority of events, what's more important is song selection, you know? So you don't want to be playing techno at a wedding. You don't want to be playing reggaeton at like basically anything that's not a salsa night, you know? Like that's the number one fundamental skill in DJing or playing music. Secondly is the mixing. So if you can get the first part, then you can do the mixing. And it just so happens that with techno and a lot of other minimal genres, mixing with 3 or more decks and this like chopping, changing, looping stuff is way more fun as a DJ, because I find it more fun anyway. Because it's just so much more creative, you know? You can just like put a track up, nope, don't want that, take it out, and it doesn't destroy the flow of anything.
Crush it. I asked Olympic Pool Maintenance League this last week, if you had to define your genre of music in 3 words, how would you do that?
The stuff that I make or the stuff that I DJ?
Both. Do one for each.
Yeah.
You get 6 words total, don't fuck
6 words total, don't screw it up. Okay.
I want a comma in the
Yeah, gotcha. Where do you want the comma? After the third word? After the second? Gotcha. So you want word, 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 comma, word, word, word. Okay. You want me to audibly say comma too?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be good. We'll do it. So it's kind of a trick question on you. Pew, pew. That what I make, what I DJ is slowly becoming the same thing. Like whenever I sit down and write a track, I want to be able to DJ it. And I want to be able to DJ it without the fact it's my track, you know? Like it's easy to shoehorn your own tracks into sets because they're yours and it makes you different and so on. But I want to genuinely be like, I would be playing this track anyway, even if it wasn't mine, essentially, is my goal in producing these days. Okay, let's just do 3 words then for all of it. I would... No comma. 3 words and then a comma? No. Okay. So I'm confused. Comma or no comma? This is great because you can't hear you either. Probably hypnotizing. Loud.
Yeah. Yep.
And like I'm going to say hypnotizing / mesmerizing is the first word. Basically, is a better word. Loud and functional.
Yep.
I would suggest.
That sounds good. Good words. Comma.
And I wrote this like 2 years ago actually. That's kind of the bane of my existence with this stuff, is if you take it seriously and don't just put stuff out, you can write a track and then it's only like a year or 2 years later that it gets released, basically. And this drives me kind of nuts because you're so happy with the track and you want to show everyone and you can't. And it's worth it if you wait, you know? Like I have some stuff coming out next month that I've been sitting on for a year, 2 years almost, kind of thing.
Sorry, on that, the thing that I find very interesting is that I know that in the time that you've been waiting for this to be released, you've written new things that sound different and arguably are like better, and like kind of like waiting for things to happen and now being like, oh, but if I could do that again, I would have actually given them these songs. I imagine that's tough to deal with.
Yeah, but that's life, you know? You're always going to write more music. It's better than the alternative, not writing more music, you know? I know a lot of people, not personally necessarily, but get caught up in the not producing side of this business. So the touring, the DJing, the going out, etc., and don't have time to write music and hate it. You know, what's this business? What's happening? Oh, I hate that. Okay. It's a very handsome-looking, real human being on your shirt. Good bit. It's good. It is a wall. That's good. So that wall is there, which is like, yeah, fantastic. I don't know. It's part of the industry. It's part of life. I'm sure it's the same in many mediums. You know, as Chris touched on last week, we're not really, with the exception of self-releasing stuff, which I'm actually a big fan of, in control of what happens with our art at the end. You know, it doesn't happen on our schedule. That's life. He's got to deal with it, basically.
That's life. You've got to deal with it. 88756-2021. What does your process look like when you sit down to write something? I have a bit of an insight into what this looks like because I've seen it happen occasionally. And from my perspective, I don't see you for 2 hours and then you go, I'm the best songwriter ever. Very humble. But from your perspective, what does the process look like from getting something to an empty Ableton campus to something that's being released or being played live?
That's very funny. Thank you. I almost entirely have narrowed down my songwriting process these days to I know exactly what I want to write before I sit down. So I'm not really an exploratory songwriter. Like I don't really sit down and just write what comes to me. I'll go, I've heard this track that does this thing in a really, really cool way and I want to try it and write something similar. So I'm a very, very big fan of reference tracks. That's good. So specifically these days, if I'm writing a track for a certain label, I'll be listening to that label's catalog and be like, all right, I need to make something that's mine but similar. It would fit here, that they'd say yes to, basically. It's also a really cool way to dissect people's music and try and understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. And there's a lot of things I've learned that way. And it just like, on the second bit about me thinking I'm the best producer ever, like, I've written thousands of songs, you know, complete songs, many more thousands not, kind of thing, over the last 10 years or so. And you just get really fast with the software that you work with. So like, I've always used Ableton 8. I've never upgraded until recently, but I still don't use it unless I have to. And I don't know if you've ever seen the whole process, but it's just clicking McGee, basically. Like, and a song appears. And it also helps that like techno and this kind of music is very repetitive and not as hard to write. It is as hard to write, but it's not as complex to write as other traditional music genres, basically.
I should clarify as well, like, you say these things like, fuck you, I'm the best, but it's also very endearing, because it's like, it's not like, haha, I'm better than everyone else. It comes from such a place of like, I am so passionate about this thing and I have put so much time and effort into it that I am now proud of what I do. Because you're also an incredibly humble person, so I'm like, let's get the facts straight. 756 is an excellent real human being.
Just on that topic, the amount of times I've come out of those studio sessions and said something like that, only for the next day to be like, oh, this is garbage. It's very reasonable.
Yeah. Again, that's what art is, right? It's like, oh, this is like, it's like 10 hours of looking at something going, this is garbage, and then you put the final touch on and you go, this is great, and then you show people and you're like, oh my god, it's awful. While we're sort of on the process situation, tell me about your file naming.
Oh, no. That's a low blow, that is.
We talked to Chris about it.
Yeah, you guys did talk to Chris about it. So I actually had to today go back in and find 4 tracks that are coming out next week on Connection Verified, wink, basically to make pre-masters, because I don't mix, like I don't write my tracks at a pre-master level. I actually write them mastered, which is really, really not the done thing in music. In my opinion, it's solely because if someone else wants to master your track, it makes it very difficult. That's life. So I had to do that. I had to go back in and find these files. And they were from, again, so these 2 tracks I wrote like a year and a half ago. I think one of them was called old.ls. One of them was called .ls. One of them was not tardy.ls, which is next to the file tardy, who's our friend. Yeah, no, that was very painful. I'm going to adopt Chris's style from now on and do things more methodically. Thanks for that.
I'm really proud of you. That's what a statement. Can you tell me a little bit about 88756, the string of numbers? Like, we're getting an idea of who you are as a real human being, but where did this name come from? I will say, though, it does fit on a poster a lot better than Olympic Pool Maintenance League does.
So, kind of the vibe behind my act, which is interesting, is it's not an act, you know? So, I will be talking as a real human being, etc. But that's what I feel like, you know? Which is kind of the whole point of it. And everything I've written in the bio and the kind of persona I portray is generally what I feel like in day-to-day life. And I actually think this is another really interesting point of this industry and music as a whole, is you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do whatever you want. Like, you go to events and people are just being themselves, like, in a variety of ways. You know, it doesn't, that takes many forms, but it's actively encouraged as a creative and in the creative industry to basically be true to yourself and who you are and how you feel. And I really like that. It's part of the reason I came with this project. Regarding the name itself, I needed a long string of numbers because the whole point of it is it's taken many versions to get to this point. Like, I am at 756. There's at least 88,755 other tries that didn't work. But there are a lot of artists with just nonsense names in techno. I don't know if I've showed you, but SX, I kind of want to get up on Spotify, but SXHCHC blah blah, pronounced shush. My personal favorite is 9x9, just 99999999999, who are a huge duo who just make acid music, basically. You won't be able to find, I'll find it. We'll do it on the screen right here. I hate that because I have to edit this afterwards. Yeah. I also spent a lot of time, I've had a lot of names over the years, at least 88,755 of them. And I don't know, it took a while to find a name that I liked in the context. And honestly, the name is not important. Like, that's kind of the point. Like, you see so many people make a name, latch an identity onto it, and then regret it, you know? Because they have to, like, be that act now forever kind of thing. Whereas my nonsensical arbitrary string of numbers is just me. Like, it doesn't really matter what I make, it's just a reflection of who I am and how I feel. Does that check out?
I think by doing something like that, by not taking it too seriously, you arguably, like, taking it the most seriously you can in a way that's still effective. Like, you don't get that, like, you know, slaving over a name for 10 hours. Like, what am I going to be called? Only to, like, 2 weeks later realize that Jim down the street is also going by the same name, or, like, you can't get that Instagram handle or something. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I respect it. It is unique. That's true. I wanna start a rival techno alias. I'm gonna be 88757, and I'm just gonna be the next iteration. But they fucked up on this one, and this one doesn't know anything about techno. It'll be funny. They were like, cool, so the last version worked really good. What if we try give this one more legs? And I'm like, nah, too many legs. It's like an AI that just falls down the second it gets its legs. Is there something that you're the most proud of? Something that, like, talk me through a couple of these in terms of, like, this is the wackiest, this is the one I'm proudest of, this is the one that took the longest.
I was hoping to play a few later, kind of thing, and tell you the story behind them. There's many that I really like for certain reasons. If you like, I'll try and take you through one that I'm really proud of now, which is unreleased, hopefully will come out at some point. But probably the first track I've written that I genuinely feel just fits in a set, like a techno set. And I haven't told anyone this is my track yet. I played it a bunch, and people seem to like it. And I don't. Besides this interview, I'm not going to. You know, like, I just want to see who would play it. It's so forward feeling, like, for my kind of music. I'm just gonna skip basically like halfway through it. Hang on.
There are a bunch of children outside the venue wearing glow sticks. I want a glow stick. While this is going.
Yes, I don't know if you can tell or not, but basically, like, this just goes over and over and over and over and over, and it never gets boring to me. And, like, it's just this 16th tom pattern that, like, you never know where the first beat of this track is. Basically, you're like 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't know, you know? It's so irritating to listen to, but
reminds me of those TikToks where people show their dogs the videos of the sound that just sounds like it keeps getting higher forever.
That's essentially what techno music to me is in a nutshell. Like, it's just something doing something for a period of time that it shouldn't be doing that sounds great.
That's good. While this plays in the background, I'm going to switch over to ye old Instagram, where I hacked into your mainframe momentarily. Your mainframe being your Instagram account. It wasn't very hard to get some questions. Probably shouldn't ask that one. Ooh, someone has asked, what's the best live gig you've ever been to?
Best in recent memory would be either the first one I went to in Brisbane that kind of made me understand why techno works in this context, which was the IWTFA second birthday with Adrian Bell and X Club, actually. That was very good. I enjoyed that a lot. I also had a lot of fun memories there because I was with a friend and it seemed like a cool thing to do. We had a great time. Or, honestly, the Dysnomia warehouse that we went to, that was really good. And I think most people agree with that was really good. Not only was it, like, loud to the point of you could hear it a kilometer away, it was friendly. There was, like, 200 people there and very minimal security, but, like, everyone just loving it and getting along with each other, and you felt safe, and it was 3 a.m, you know? It was great.
That was a fun event. That was my first warehouse, and 10 minutes into being there, my shirt broke. That's not the most interesting part about that event, but that's what I remember. Someone has asked, what is the future for the Brisbane techno scene? Will we see more venues, producers, fans?
Look, I mean, this is just my opinion. I don't definitively know anything, but I would suggest techno will always stay in the city. Like, it has a better techno scene than people give it credit for. Like, of all the major cities I've been involved in this area, Melbourne is obviously the biggest. Perth recently has started popping off, just saying, thanks to a couple of companies. And Brisbane in its own way is the same. So even this weekend, like, or the coming weekends, there's a bunch of different promoters throwing gigs that are techno themes. There aren't that many that are just what we make and what we're proud of, but I don't really mind, you know? Like, I think it's big enough, people are happy enough, the people are friendly enough in the scene that it'll keep at least staying where it is, if not growing more. Like, I think the big thing that will change for it is what generally happens, at least in Australia, and especially in COVID, is people get more popular, start getting shows and leave, you know, which is fair. Like, good on them, do your life, etc. But I think this basically will need to stop for this city to be a techno hub, you know, like, and maybe some law changes and so on, sound restrictions in various places, where we've only got so many good venues. Like, in my opinion, one of the better ones is Warehouse 25, where we're going to be playing next week. It's properly loud, very cool space, small enough that it doesn't feel empty, but big enough that you can have a bunch of people there. It's great. But I know in other places there are better venues, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes over the years.
What's coming up for you? What can we expect the next couple of weeks, next couple of months? What's happening now?
Good question. This is a great song. This is coming out in Avoidant later in the year. Woo! Yeah, so for some reason I started this project, started me, I guess, in early 2019. I put out a bunch of music, slowly got better, never really took the social media stuff seriously. Last year or so I started taking it more seriously, and it's been popping off for no reason. So coming up we have this gig, which I'm very excited about. Whoa! The hoster, that's the stuff that is. To accompany this release, I'm putting out an EP with the label head, who we're interviewing next week. So, sorry, you and Richard are interviewing next week? Yeah. And yeah, I'm excited about that. That'll be cool. I also have a bunch of podcasts coming out. It was just announced yesterday that I'm playing at Club Melbourne next month, which I'm really excited about. That is my favorite venue in the world. They have happy hour from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. That is just insane, right? Like, short of these places in Germany and Europe, which are just 24 hours slog. Germany and Europe, which are just 24-hour slogfest. Slogfest. Yeah. Let's go with that. Why not? Thanks. Do you want the mic? Okay. Yeah, so that's a really cool venue with a bunch of lovely people, essentially. It's in-stations and friends, and I'm very excited to play there. I've been there a few times, and it's a really cool place and a lovely scene. And then actually the next night, so that's on June 4th. June 5th, I'm playing in Perth with a Grit crew, who are lovely, lovely individuals. That hasn't been announced yet, but it should be ASAP, like early this week coming. Yeah, so I've got maybe Newcastle as well, the week after that. We're trying to figure out as well. But I don't know, I feel like what I'm doing is slightly unique. So not only do I do the music stuff, I also write programs that do things like this. So I have an automatic music video generator, for example, that I use to write all my music videos. Because screw writing music videos. Editing this video was hard enough last time. Like, oh god, if I can automate that, I will. You know what? I'm going to try that before we get back. Thank you. It's going to be terrible. Anyway. Yeah, I'm really grateful, basically, to be able to go off and play a bunch of loud music with a bunch of cool people. And I'm really looking forward to it. Like, sorry, just one last thing on that topic. Avoidant, who are a sub-label of Soma, which is one of my favorite techno labels of all time, been around forever, from Glasgow. I don't know how you pronounce that actually in the proper accent. Glasgow, yeah. I think they're Glasgow. Let's go with that. Easily my favorite label, hands down, that I've ever worked with, have been nothing but polite and professional and so on in conversation. I have a track coming up with them in a VA this month, sometime. Could even be as we speak, who knows, kind of thing. That I'm going to play for you at some point, probably after my second track. Yeah, I'm really excited about, essentially, like, for some reason this project is receiving some attention. I'm happy with it. That was never the aim, but I think it's really cool. And if I can spread this kind of music to more people, then I'm happy.
One of the reasons we're doing this interview series is that, like, at Double Hands, I think it's one of our favorite things about this industry, all creative industries, is finding people who are passionate about what they're doing. And I have never met a human being who is more passionate about what they're doing than you are. And it is very, very lovely to see. The song that's playing right now is called The Fine Dining Experience. I love that name. Can you tell me about where this name came from?
Okay, two things. One, if you listen very closely in the background, you can hear cutlery, which is sampled, which is great, which is the whole point. And then right now is Welcome to the Fine Dining Experience in Spanish. And then the song just gets wonky, and it's fantastic. And they ask you if they hope that you've enjoyed your stay in Spanish at the end. Well, just like, it's actually inspired by Chris, just saying, his naming style of like just throwing down on a wall and it sticks. But I also tried to make it more like incorporated into the song.
I think this is one of my favorite tracks of yours, but it's because it's got words in it, and my dumb monkey brain likes words. I also like 88756 because it goes 88756 88756. I had a very fun experience once though, where I got opening track stuck in my head, and there's no words in that song, and my brain was so confused. It was like there's just thumps in my head.
Welcome to my life. I've told you this actually before privately, that like half the reason I like this music so much is it's not as catchy, so it doesn't get stuck in my head, because I'm the kind of human being that has music stuck in the head all the time, and like it can be kind of stressful sometimes to like shut that part of the brain off. So this is less like that. Like pop music is so good at getting stuck in your head. That's the whole point of it. People design that music for that reason, so you think about it all the time and you buy it.
Tell us a little bit about this track in particular. What was writing this like?
This was a fun process. I wrote this like because I listened to a bunch of electro stuff actually. So this is coming out. So hang on, they're telling us that we should have a good day in the song. Yeah. Okay.
I hope you have a good day.
Aww.
I have to say it in Spanish. El hope you have a good day.
Espero que tienes un buen día.
Sorry, you know Spanish as well?
No. That's no in Spanish. For those playing along at home, yes, for some reason I speak Spanish. So like, yeah. They put that in there, you know? There wasn't enough slots of RAM. Yeah, so I listened to a lot of the Avoidant catalogue and artists like Assembly Code and Jensen and Deceptor and Carl Finlow and stuff like that. And this is what I came up with, essentially. And I like the wacky twist of the vocals and the whole kind of fact it sounds slightly wrong. Yeah, it's great. I enjoyed this. I actually bounced this track off Warren a lot, who I was going to talk about with the first track. Yeah, let's do that.
Shout out to Warren. Hey, go on, Warren. We miss you. He's not dead. He's just in Melbourne. Those two things might as well be the same.
Do you mind if I talk a bit about this track before I play it? So about 2 years ago, I wrote a track called Event Horizon, which is essentially, it's never released or anything. It's essentially a very, very cinematic / orchestral piece of techno music. And it's not a techno piece of music. It's more like just a dance track with this just like haunting brass in it, essentially, brass growl. And I wrote the track and I kind of just dumped it because I didn't feel like it would go anywhere or no one would ever want it, essentially, from like a DJ point of view. And Warren, my roommate, who I listen to, I hope is listening to this and will send to afterwards, was like, no, man, you can't do this. This is my favorite thing you've ever written. You really, really need to write this. Like, I'll pay good money to have it out there, blah, blah, blah. And to prove it to me, he went and made an orchestral version of it because he's also a producer. And it's really good. It's one of my favorite pieces of music I've ever heard. And so basically, I'm going to start playing it. I took that track and combined it with my track at the end. So the first half is his orchestral piece and the end is just my own techno track, basically accompanied. And yeah, so there you go, Warren. You got what you wanted. It's in the world. It may probably never get released, but who knows? I think it's going to be a fantastic set opener, actually, because no one knows it. No one's heard it. I've played it to you before. You seem to like it.
It does wiggle me. That's the meter of how good one of these songs are, is how much I wiggle.
That's fair. Do you mind if we just play this, Wesley, and I cue stuff up?
We will be back with the mouth words later. For now, enjoy the mellow vibes that will probably not stay mellow for very long.
In a fun technical difficulties, our video feed has died, which means I'm now your radio DJ, which actually suits me. I think that's more fun, frankly.
You have a face for radio.
Thanks, Brooke. So this was the essentially cinematic techno piece that was never released that my friend Warren inspired me to finish. By finishing it himself, pretty much. So big shout outs to Warren, if he's there. Coming in is a track that's forthcoming on the Connection Verified EP actually, and it's different because it has vocals and it tells a story.
We shall create a new world. A world of sound. A world of peace. Romance and human alike. Living in perfect harmony. No one will want for anything. Everyone will be happy.
Sorry, I may have forgot to mention that it's Microsoft Sam speaking over the top. We couldn't get a better robot in.
Romance and human alike. Living in complete chaos. Please do not be afraid.
This is another song that I really like, is Robots and Humans. Very cool song.
A world of hell.
I actually really like this track. I might do more stuff like it in the future because I've heard other similar electro tracks with robot voiceovers and so on. Microsoft Sam is more a joke than anything else, but it still works, and that frankly says a lot, I think.
Yeah, one of the few artists that I know the name of is Kleino3. I really like that style of like storytelling through this music medium, which is definitely something that this does. And I think it's like a super interesting concept and something I'd be keen to see you explore more.
Yeah, no, I should clarify. Kleino3 are basically doing what I want to do, but better, and have done for a while. They're a fantastic act, still anonymous. If I could spend one day in the studio with them, I'd love to.
Well, if you look under your seat, I'm kidding. Can you imagine if Kleino3 was under there? Flourish on that.
So this is the Avoidant one coming out. It's called Iterate and Obliterate, and I really, really like it. That's because I like all the songs.
Songs. And so you should. They're good songs.
This is a shout out to Craig Ward for the Woo Yeah sample. Woo. What I love most about this track, I think, is it's so simple. It's like one synth line, playing a nice melody, great drum kit. If I say so myself, it's not mine, it's an 808. It just works.
A question about drums, because you talk about drums and percussion a lot, but I watch you make this stuff and you're at a computer. I know it makes sense, but in my head I'm like, a drum is a drum. How does drums translate in this context?
So by drum I mean samples from a drum machine. So there are things like, I think a Roland who make them, yeah, the 909, 707, 808s. They were all hardware drum machines, so I've got some I could show you one day, but like not those in particular, but same idea. And these pieces of machinery essentially make drum sounds through synthesis. They have very distinct sounds, so like the 808 is in every hip hop track ever. It's very boomy, you'll hear it. This genre uses the same kind of drum kit. Percussion and drum sounds in particular, I think, are the number one like differentiator in music genre, in my opinion. This one's called Convergence, and it was from my third self-released EP, essentially, full of tracks that I didn't believe fit the typical techno sound, essentially. So that's why I called it deviations. They deviate from the techno sound. I really like this piece of music. I think it's really cool. It's very functional. I know I've said I like them all, but I do like them all. They're all my children, essentially. Yeah.
As well, like you sort of at the beginning of this project self-release most of your stuff. What's the process like for getting something released on a label?
It's a lovely time, in which case you're asking me personally, which it's not very fun. Like, unless you're very lucky straight up with sending something to someone and they understand and it works, that can be great. But you'll have a lot more success if you personalize the whole pitch. So only send music to people and labels that you know would put out that music. You know? At a very basic level, if you're making drum and bass, don't send your music to a house label. They're not going to care. You know? And if they do listen to it, frankly, they'll be upset and not listen to anything else you've said. Like, whereas if I've sent stuff to labels with like really genuine personal pictures, and even if they don't like it, they're always really appreciative. And they say, you know, thank you for this, please send us more in the future, blah, blah, and so on. Really early on especially, I think it's better to just self-release stuff and build up some kind of following so a label knows you're committed in some aspect.
You about sort of the DJing process. How much do you have prepared before you go on DJ set? Is it something that you practice? Is it something that you just go, I've got these songs and I vaguely know how they're going to fit together? Like, what does that look like?
It's almost exclusively the latter. So I know how my library works with everything else in the library. So every single track I have on this USB, there's probably like, not that many, there's only like 400 or 500 or something I've bought personally. A lot of DJs have more, like a lot more, you know? And I know what works well with what, and I know what flows together. At least I think I do. I think I have an idea of. So it's way more fun just winging a set. Like, I'll typically have a start and an end, and then just have fun in the middle, basically.
You say that very nonchalantly, but it blows my mind that you have a USB with 500 things on it, and you know what they all are and how they interact with one another. Please don't sell yourself short on that skill. That is absolutely nuts. Sorry. No, I was going to say, how long does it take you to get to that point? Is it something where you listen to this once and go, yes, this is going to fit here, here, and here? Are you like Sherlock Holmes big braining it? Or do you listen to something a couple times and find out where it fits?
So it's DJing, right? It comes with practice. I just want to hear the track. So I would suggest, like, if you want to get better at it, you just practice. Like, anyone who's ever lived with me would tell you I play a lot of music and it's very annoying, but I seem to be having a lot of fun when I do it. Places like Quiver as well come in if you've never learned how to do this yourself or are interested in trying. There are DJ workshops here, which are great. I don't know, it comes very naturally to me actually, DJing stuff. Like, the beat matching doesn't, which is why you see me struggle sometimes, and it's especially hard when it's loud. Like, I haven't had enough experience beat matching in a loud setting, but it's really fun. Enjoy it. And you can do this like more automated, so by using sync and so on and just like planning everything in advance. It's no fun, you know? Like, trouble with that as well is you never switch it up, or it's hard to switch it up. So if someone comes to see you twice, you play the same song, and people get sad. This track is so good, by the way. I'm going to play it for a little bit longer.
as we're pressing buttons. Nice. Do you have any advice for baby producers, baby DJs?
Practice. Have fun. Like, try and get as much experience as you can. Record sets as well is a really big one, so you can listen back to them later and figure out what you've done wrong. I don't think I've ever tried mixing in while talking over something, but this is really fun. I'm enjoying this. It'll come naturally. If you love it and you enjoy doing it, you'll do it a lot, so you'll get better. There are many, many good YouTube channels and tutorials and stuff as well out there, which can help. This would be a perfect example where DJing where I would just add a third track to this, because I've got the outgoing track, which was Momentum off Toolkit, my recent release, coming into something I'm really proud of next, which is unreleased, which has this really cool synth line. And they just work well together, so I'd like a third track to mix into this, you know? And if you come see me down, or see us down on next Saturday, the 15th, you will. It's essentially one like continuous wall of noise. It's great.
Is there anything in your opinion about this industry or artists in this industry that like frustrates you or that you think could be done better?
I mean, yes, but that's the same with everything, you know? Like, nothing's perfect. I think as far as this industry goes, it's actually really good. Like, it's the only music genre / industry I can think of where, like, as a completely or relatively unknown artist, you can send demos to big labels and so on, and they'll listen to them and actually try it. Like, the vast majority of labels are releasing songs based on merit, not popularity, you know? And honestly, any gripes I might have are overshadowed by that comparison. This is the other track that I'm really, really proud of, especially the synth.
This is a question that I know the answer to, but I'll ask for the folks at home. Have you ever experimented with vinyl, and is it something that you would look at doing in the future?
I would love to. It's fantastic. I love watching DJs play it. The 88756 project wasn't provided enough funds to support that kind of hobby. But in the future, definitely would love to. Always wanted a vinyl release. I've had a CD release, which was dope, that I really enjoyed. Because growing up, I listened to a lot of CDs. And I'm more from that era as opposed to vinyl. But I think physical music is a great medium because it forces the person writing that piece of song to basically like have a coherent structure or a reason to be producing it rather than just doing it because they want to, you know?
This just in, if you come to our Lost and Sound event, you are personally funding the 88756 vinyl fund. For legal reasons, that is a joke.
is a lot of the new unreleased stuff I was telling you about that I think is better. It's so easy to DJ, it just lends itself to being DJed. It has a strict, rigid structure, like anything sounds great with anything, percussion-wise. I could be playing another track here, but still sound perfect, kind of thing. I guess I'm happy that it's slowly starting to sound more like this. This is the stuff I enjoy playing too.
Kind of cheese.
Like a brie, since I met you actually. Like. For those of you at home, these visual effects are not in post. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Holly from Quivers here trying to fix it and we're like, hell yeah, it's dope.
Like stuff like this is my favorite because like you only add one or two elements occasionally and it just makes a world of difference. Like this section with the ride, which we always joke about, the really high cymbal basically, it just has so much more energy than the previous and it's a very kind of natural progression of track. think honestly, like the most underrated part of any creative pursuit is like the people you get to meet and so on, the connections you make. This is a remix for a friend of mine from Argentina. He actually doesn't know that I speak Spanish. I've kept that to myself very quiet because it's kind of fun watching all their posts and so on, stuff like that. There's a guy called JXXXO who is super talented young man from Argentina. And I don't know, I really enjoyed this. He was like, oh man, I really like your stuff. Do you mind doing a remix and so on and so forth? And yeah, of course I would. It's great. I think more people should be open to this kind of thing, frankly. Like, not necessarily approaching people for remixes, but like, actually no, that way around. So if you really like an artist and they're like not huge, I'd message them, say, hey, if you want a remix done, I'd love to give it a try, blah, blah. And I think more often than not, people are willing to give you a go. Yeah.
Leads to the question about, I guess, remixing in general. Like, what percentage of what you do is remixes, and how is a remix different to just writing something from scratch?
Unlike Chris, you guys interviewed last week, I love a remix. I love taking a track and just destroying it, making it completely different. I've always in my career worked with audio, so like I've written many bootlegs, some which I'll play later, which is essentially a remix when you don't have the stems or the individual parts of the track. I find this a very fun challenge. I love doing it. So that's my take on that.
I'm going to give you a real wacky song rundown. I'm going to give you a Carly Rae Jepsen song and be like, do with this what you can. And it's going to be nothing. It's going to be great.
Label who did this actually were PAS label, problematic antagonistic solutions, I think, or something like that. Sorry for butchering it. They had a really cool marketing strategy with this EP, which I think we should try in the future, which is they just sent it to a bunch of famous DJs unsolicited, and with a caveat that if a DJ was going to play it, they would never mention it. So like, there are some really cool people that I know who are playing this track or have played it, who I can't tell anyone. It would defeat the whole purpose, right? But I know that they have, and the point is those DJs have cool tracks they can use now. I think it's a really cool idea. It takes all of the like fame away from it, I guess, or the status away from it.
What do you mean? So like they don't credit it as a song that they played?
They would credit it as a song that they played, but like this label is not allowed to use the fact that that DJ likes it in the marketing for it. So like post it publicly anywhere, essentially. If the DJ themselves do it, sure, you know, but it has to come from their end, basically. Like,
that is a fun little strategy.
There are many tracks with the word dub in the title that have directly inspired this track. You'll hear one day and be like, I know why this track is written this way. It's not a copy or anything, but it's a very similar vibe, which is why I wrote it. Like, this is the one time I sat down and went, I want to make something like this, and I did. Something I've started doing recently is panning my writes, which is more interesting. So this really high-pitched noise that has a lot of energy goes from left to right like no one's business, and it sounds way less static. Like, it's something I picked up from Chris, actually, and a bunch of other artists.
Actually, yeah, do you want to take a moment and Chris we've talked about a couple times, Olympic Mate, is like, is anyone else sort of in the local Brisbane scene that sort of stands out to you as like inspirational, like people you want to work with in the future, people you have worked with?
So there's a lot of great people in the local music scene producing techno, but the majority of them I suspect, well, I know for a fact, produce on hardware. So techno itself lends itself to be made on hardware, like no computer involved whatsoever. And this is fantastic and great to watch, but I can never really relate to it, if that makes sense. So Chris is the only one that I know that just primarily works on Ableton, essentially, on software. People like Mo, so Moscow's, is fantastic, but like mostly hardware, and then some After Effects and editing. RJE, or Reed as well, as far as I'm aware, is a mostly live hardware recording software messed up dude. Ander as well, NDR94, a lot of hardware that just ends up becoming hardware. But there's a ton of like underrated talents in other genres that are not just techno specifically. Like, I would suggest the number of artists in the city that make just techno or close to it, it's not that high compared to a lot of places I've been to. I would be one of only a couple people who DJ their own stuff as well. Like, in particular, Reed RJ has started doing it recently as well, which I'm really proud of and I was pushing for. Chris is also interesting to DJing his own stuff, but I think it's just such a fun way of playing music that you've written that makes sense. And I hope more people start it in the future. Maybe come along to our event or similar and be like, yeah, I could do that. That's cool. And I love teaching people this stuff too. It's great fun. I don't know if that's obvious, but I really enjoy this. And I hope that is obvious.
It's very obvious. And it's adorable.
For whatever reason, this has been by far my most successful song, and I think it's just the acid sound is just so classic, so timeless, and like genre breaking, I guess. It's in so many different pieces of music, and it works so well. I had nothing to do with this track. I wrote it in about 3 hours, and after I finished it, I was like, this is good. This is very good. Actually, I don't know who I talked to, but I was really excited. I was just sharing it with everyone when I finished it. This was like 2 years ago now. It's another example where this track just sits there great. You need a third deck. You can add something else into it. It sounds like it's part of one song.
88756. We love third decks. 56.
Curious, to yourself, could you tell that like that sped up a lot and sounded very different after I stopped whatever I was doing?
Absolutely not, no.
Cool. That's good for me to know because I sped that up for like 3% and 3 BPM-ish. And to me that's very noticeable and it kills the mood a lot. Like that's why you do this slowly kind of thing, but I'm just showing you a bunch of my tracks. But that's super interesting for me to hear, essentially. And I'll be banking that away in the old knowledge bank.
Yeah, I'm a pretty much complete dingus when it comes to this stuff, so if you need just like a blank canvas, that's what I'm here for. I'm gonna do the dance from Club Penguin now.
Something I've noticed with the trend of techno music these days in general is it's getting faster again. So like back in the 90s, early 2000s, it was fast. It was like 140 BPM plus. And then it got to like 128, the proper like Berghain style. And now it's getting faster again.
Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Why do you think that has happened?
I love it personally. I think it's great. Tracks that are fast but still maintain that kind of minimal integrity, like it's basically free energy if something's faster. You don't need to add another element to fill in space. It's just there's energy in itself by being literally faster. If you take a really boring track that, let's say, 120 beats per minute and make it 150, at the very least it'll sound more energetic. So this is again one of my favorite tracks ever written because it has Dustin, who you never met, I don't think, but one of our old German friends. Shout out to Dustin. I assume he's not watching, but that's it. Lovely man. Just recorded like 30 seconds of German for me with nonsense. Like, so good. He's talking about a particular drink that he invented, and it's like the outro of this track, and it sounds great because he's speaking in German. I have another track with vocals from Sean, who Ein Wasserbieter, which is One Water Please over and over again. I love this stuff. Like, I love just nonsense words in different languages. I think it's a very, like, program thing to do, you know?
What's playing now?
So, in a classic human being jest, this track will never be released, by the way. This is the only time you'll ever find a recording of this. It's a really, really, really old ancient Greek chant that one of my roommates used as a joke because his girlfriend hated it. So, no other way around. The girlfriend played it for the boyfriend because the boyfriend hated it. And I was listening to it one day and I was like, I could do a techno version of that. So I did, in like, not that long at all. It's not good, but like, it's so much fun just doing stuff like this, you know?
I don't know what you're saying. I rate this. I'm vibing right now.
Anyway, as all good songs arise, this one was a bit. It was a complete joke, and it makes me very happy that it happened. And again, we'll never play it, but it's fun. You know, this is supposed to be fun. Enjoy this kind of thing.
Unrelated question, but we were just in that off microphone moment talking about vinyls. If someone came to you and they were like, we can press something onto vinyl, what would you get pressed onto vinyl of the stuff that you've written?
That's a really hard question. It's an even harder question to be thinking about when I'm trying to dematch these two things. I would suggest probably some of the stuff that I've got unreleased, some of the tracks I played for you, just because I think they're functional and people would actually use them. But otherwise, like a full electro album of the stuff I made, like I'm sure it'll happen eventually. I can mind fan it. I'm in no rush either. Like I can't afford a vinyl collection. Like
I have one vinyl and I bought it because it looks pretty, and it's called it's called Shrimp by Mr. Scruff. Or is it Scruff by Mr. Shrimp? I don't remember.
So going back to what I said a little bit earlier about bootlegs, this is a bootleg. So this is Tim Tama Alignment, which is a fantastic track that I just remixed directly from the file, essentially. Made it way faster, way heavier, way less breaksy, if that makes sense. Sorry, way less like stop-starty, more forward-focused. And I really enjoy this. I have a couple of these in this series that I'll just be playing back to back now because I think they're great, especially in the right place and the right time. And this kind of style is huge in Europe now for some reason. Big shout outs to most of the people out there who write industrial stuff. So this is what I would classify more as industrial techno, which is just huge kick drops. Like if you heard this in a big system, it would just kill you. Like a normal system will pick up with like even a raw 808 or a 99 and make it sound great. These just sound like you want to die. Like they're so loud. It's intense for a long period of time, but in small amounts, like just great. Like I really rate this track and I enjoy playing it as well. stuff is actually definitely inspired by Sub Club the first time I went there. I went for happy hour at 5 a.m. and they were just playing 140 plus BPM industrial slammers and having a blast. They had so much fun. It was great. It definitely has a time and a place.
I like your use of the word slammers.
This is not a classic like it's just 5 a.m. and you're just not sure where you are and something is playing and it sounds fantastic. Not necessarily my track, but like that's the vibe I'm going for. This is another bootleg. It's a track by Rote, who I think is Daniel Avery and someone else. The original is way slower and nowhere near as heavy, and as soon as I heard the synth, I was just like, I need to use this in some capacity. Yeah, I think it worked out pretty well.
track coming out, this whole EP. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Because I was just saying to you before, I remember listening to this stuff and it was some of the first stuff that I'd heard of yours. And then like, it took me a while to adjust that not everything was just sort of like balls to the wall intense. So tell us a little bit about this one.
So there was a record label, still is, called rave.zrt from Hungary. And they were lovely enough to basically just directly message me on Instagram when I first set up the account and be like, hey man, I really like your tracks. I heard Sentient Meat, which I'm going to play as my closing track because I like a lot. Wondering if you can make us stuff similar, etc. We typically like a harder, faster style, etc., etc., so on and so forth. And you're goddamn right I did. You know, if someone's going to go out of their way to message me and ask and be polite about it, I'm going to try. What I like so much about this track, and it's the same thing that Chris pointed out, or actually Richard pointed out, is that none of the hats are introduced when they should be. Like the offbeat hat just comes in at some random time, not even on bar. I don't know, it's one of my, again, favourite pieces of musical theory or whatever to make it sound like you've actually put effort into a track, rather than just following a strict structure. I'm actually going to probably just fade this out and then cut straight into our last track, which is Sentient Meat, which was released on an Italian label and just popped off for no reason. It's still to date, except for very specific noise, which is really good. Like my happy, widest release, best received track, I guess. Like, made a lot of friends from that track actually. Noose, who I've never mentioned but I've talked to you about a lot, messaged me out of the blue because he's like, man, I really like your track, blah blah, now we're friends, kind of thing. I have a podcast coming out for his label and we've written some tracks together and stuff like that. Another really good producer from the Netherlands, basically. And they're essentially going through hell at the moment, so music is a way they can entertain themselves and so on.
Sentient Meat, what an excellent name. Words of me 2 minutes ago, Chonky. This is our final song for the evening. Thanks so much for coming. You guys have been great. We'll do our final things to plug. Thank you firstly to Quiver for having us last weekend, having us today, for having us next weekend. Incredible venue. Definitely recommend checking them out and everything they're doing because it's very important for the local music scene. As you're aware, all of this is in preparation for Lost in Sound, which is our event happening next Saturday, the 15th of May at 8 p.m. Warehouse 25. Olympic Pool Maintenance League from last week will be there. This one will be there. I'll be there. Not making music, but I'll be there. Doing art, actually. An administrator will be there from Connection Verified, who's coming in next week. And just before we head off, where can we find you? Tell me your address, is what I'm asking.
It's noneofyourbusiness.com. No. First off, I love this vocal, this track coming. It's that's actually my voice, by the way. I told you that, yeah. I am everywhere. Everything you can find, 88756 on Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, blah, blah. I hate that I am, but that's life. On SoundCloud too. Begrudgingly on SoundCloud, the world's worst platform. I don't care that I'm saying that. If SoundCloud ever sponsors me, I will say no. Their site is bad, genuinely bad. Yeah, thanks for having me, bro. It's very fun. I hope you had fun too.
It was a pleasure having you, and now we will be played out by the sweet, sweet sounds of Sentient Meat. Thanks, friends.